Hello, everyone. We are heading for a next union budget again on the 1st of February. There is an air of anticipation, and there is a lot of hope that perhaps this budget, given that it's being presented in trying times, with various demands on the exchequer for addressing the various needs of the economy, whether be it from a job creation perspective or to accelerate the growth in the economy. We are fortunate here to have with us Mr. Kris Gopalakrishnan, who has not just founded, been a co-founder at Infosys and also helped enabled many startups to actually see the light of day, and also has been deeply involved with research and has invested heavily on furthering the cause of research and basic research at that, be it brain research or looking in terms of computing. So thank you so much, Mr. Kris, for your time. May I begin by asking you that, whenever we speak to the experts when it comes to budget, the normal concerns are around issues of what can the budget do for job creation, what can the budget do to accelerate the growth of the economy, what can the budget do to address the pain points which those who have at the bottom end of the income curve are facing. Because we have a polarization of wealth in some sense, because rich, wealthy getting wealthier and the other adverse effects. What is your concern? What is it that you are hoping to see in this budget?
First of all, thanks, Kumar, for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts. All the points that you raised are very relevant. There is an expectation from this budget. See, we need to remember that, this crisis, I believe, has increased the confidence in India's ability to withstand any shock, any crisis, because we are still a developing country, per capita of 2,000, but we have vaccinated about 1 billion people, 1.5 billion vaccines given to people, all because we were able to design, develop, and manufacture these vaccines in India. Otherwise, this would not have been affordable for a poor country like India. We have also developed indigenous technology like ventilators, PPE, and things like that. Before the pandemic, we didn't have domestic manufacturing in these things, but today we are exporting this. Now, having said that, both of these aspects actually point to something which I am focused on. That is our own capability to innovate, our own capability to design new products and services, and create new businesses, create new jobs, and make India better. So that is what I want to focus on. So if you want to build an India of the 21st century for the future, I believe that it has to start from our investments in research. Currently, India invests about 0.7% of GDP in research. I would like to see this go to about 3% of GDP in research. Government invests about 0.6% of GDP. I would like to see this go as 1.5%, and private sector investments must go from about 0.1% to 1.5%. That's a significant increase. Now, coming to government investment, see, basic research is primarily supported by philanthropy and government investments. And this is why government's investment into research is very, very important. There are so many new technologies that are emerging. Space, the whole area of genomics and genetics, synthetic biology, computing itself is evolving into Internet of Things and computing everywhere. Then AR, VR, we're talking about NFT, all of these things, and AI, ML, all of these things will require us to create our own intellectual property, our own products and services. And so we need to create the capability in our research labs. We need to scale up the quantity and quality of research that we do in the country. And I would like to see government increase. Government has come out with mission mode programs on space, mission mode programs on quantum computing, mission mode programs on cyber physical systems, into biotechnology and things like that. We need to make sure that enough money is invested in these technologies. Government also has announced the National Research Foundation, but it has not been activated. I would like to see this being activated. So that's from the government side. On the private sector side, we should incentivize investment into R&D. Internal R&D, that is R&D done within the organization, and R&D done along with academic institutions, etc. We should make sure that, previously we used to give 150% credit for the money invested in a recognized R&D institution. I think we should reinstate that. Now it's 100%. We should reinstate that, and we should encourage companies to invest in R&D by giving them double the credit, double the amount that they invested as credit for investment in research. So these are some things I would hope that would be addressed in this budget.
You said a very important point about this substantial increase in actually the spending on R&D from the government sector, from 0.6% to about 1.5%, and for private from 0.1 to 1.5. Are you saying this in a time period of 1 year?
Well, the direction has to be set, and we need to make sure that over the next 2-3 years, we need to make this indeed happen. So on the government side, increase the expenses. On the private sector, increase the expenses and give them incentives to increase the expenses. Both are important. See, because of the multiplicity of technologies that are emerging, and these are going to impact every business. Any business I look at, automotive, for example, there is a transition to EV. There's a transition to autonomous cars. There's a transition to new business models. So every industry is changing, and we need to create winners in every industry. Not just winners in India, but winners across the world. That is how we will march towards a $5 trillion or a $10 trillion economy. I am confident that we will do it, but we need to make sure that we push the economy in this direction, and we need to achieve this as quickly as possible.
If you can help us tell the connect and convey to people the direct connect of spending more in innovation and to job creation, or is it that it's going to be only in the urban and the elite job creation? How do you look at job creation and this investment in innovation?
So let me take an example from banking, right? When computers were introduced way back in the 70s and 80s, there was concern that jobs would be lost. But look at the banking sector today. It's many times bigger than what it was in the 70s and 80s. The automation has completely transformed banking to such an extent that you can access your accounts, you can do your transactions on your mobile phone. We have brought in millions of people into the formal banking sector, given them accounts, etc. People talk about the number of new bank accounts that have been created, for ordinary people, and number of jobs are significantly higher. And this is true for every sector. Any sector that is growing, that's changing, will create new jobs. Of course, people will have to be trained to take on these new jobs, and then you will see that the number of jobs increases. I'll give you another example, more from the bottom side. So Amul popularized the cooperative movement and increased the milk production in the country, and because of that, there has been a cascading number of jobs created across the country, not just in rearing the cows and milking and producing milk, but producing products out of that, distributing these products around the world, exporting milk products around the world. India has become the largest milk producer in the world. A classic example of investing in innovation, investing in new business models, and creating a very large industry, creating new jobs and creating wealth for the country.
The other point which was there is actually in the current scenario globally, there is the challenge from China. And people talk of snarled supply chains, costs going up. When I was talking to a few people in the pharmaceutical industry, they were saying that we have to look in terms of innovation because that is the only way to compete with China now. So anything in terms of this relevance today, in terms of in a global context, if you can just tell us why the imperatives of actually going more for heavy investments into research now.
See, we have all realized that the globe is a highly interconnected supply chain world. Every product that we touch has components, has sub-components coming from different parts of the world, and dependence on China is very, very significant everywhere in the world in some sense. And we hear that there's only 1 week of chips, the computer chips, right, or the chips, the electronic chips that are necessary for any component today. And a lot of those are manufactured in China. In pharmaceutical industry, many of the ingredients are actually manufactured in China. So there is now a need to create self-sufficiency, risk mitigation, and create domestic capacity so that in a future crisis, if the supply chain gets broken, we can actually manage this and de-risk. Before the pandemic, we were, I mentioned this, we were not manufacturing ventilators, we were not manufacturing PPEs, we were not manufacturing testing kits, etc. But today, all of these things are manufactured domestically and now exported. Of course, vaccine is manufactured in India and exported, right? So we need to create those capabilities in India. I'm confident that we can do it, right? And we can do it in a cost-effective manner if we come together and decide. Government, academia, the research ecosystem, and industry must come together and join hands collaboratively and work in creating these components and these products in India. This will require investments into capital infrastructure. This will require investments into creating the designs that are necessary because we need to create our own proprietary designs and things like that. But it can be done, and we need to look at it in a strategic manner and do this. Similarly, government has announced a very large program for semiconductor manufacturing. 70,000 crores has been allocated for this, right? So we need to take advantage of that and make sure that we create a domestic semiconductor hardware manufacturing industry, because our import bill again is very significant. So we need to do these things, and these will create the right kind of jobs strategically. Ensure that we don't our dependency on global supply chains are reduced, and in fact we can probably export and grow our economy much faster.
If you could just tell us a bit about the areas in which you think, government, the research, the spending that they will have to increase from 0.6 to 1.5. What are some of the areas in which they say the government can increase investments in? Which are the areas in which private you think in investment? The reason I ask you this, there was a time, if you remember, we used to have within the government sector, the manufacturing for vaccines. We had 3 major entities. Even for antibiotics we had. All these were shut later. So which are the areas where you think they should invest, where private can invest?
All sectors will require investments. We have to strategically select which ones to do first, etc. And I'll come to which ones first. But the way I look at it is typically basic research is supported by government and philanthropy, and applied research is supported by the industry. Because industry must get returns on their investment, typically in the 3 to 5 year horizon, whereas government can look at maybe beyond 5 years of investment. So typically basic research is supported by government and applied research is supported by industry. So what I mean by this is the deep tech R&D, high risk R&D is supported by government, when a prototype is developed, when the feasibility is established, industry takes over and moves the product from the lab to market. That is when the venture community also comes in, startups are created, or a product is created by the industry. There is still the translational part that is required, from the prototype to minimum viable product, establishing the product market fit and things like that. That's what the industry will do much better. So that's how I see the breakup between government's responsibility and industry's responsibility. So clearly both need to work hand in hand together. Having said that, we must look at areas where it can help the entire country. So for example, when we look at pharma, right? It is important for India to do R&D in this, because we need to make sure that all the drugs discovered are affordable to the entire population. So for example, today, there is a therapy for cancer, which is based on, programming your immune system, what is called immunotherapy, right? A dose is like approximately $600,000. Even the rich people in the US cannot afford this. Now, how can anybody in India afford this, right? So if India works on such products, such inventions, I strongly believe that the cost can come down. When you look at the vaccine, right, the cost of vaccine initially was $30, $40, and India brought it down to approximately 150 rupees, which is about $2, right? So again, a good example of what India can do if it does the R&D, if it does the manufacturing. And this is what is needed, right? And this is why India must. And this is not just helping India, but it's helping the 7 billion people in the world. Because when the research is done in the developed country, this is targeted towards the top 10% of the population. Whereas if the research is done in India, 7 billion, 100% of the world's population benefits, because it becomes affordable suddenly, right? So that's the role that India can play. And that's a very important role. I believe we can help not just India, but rest of the world. Now, how can we mobilize resources? I believe that this is a very small sum of money that we are talking about. And if we become efficient in our tax collection, if we become efficient in how we apply these funds to the various programs and projects, I think we can address the issue of affordability, because all we are talking about from the government side is an adding approximately less than percentage of GDP to be spent on research.
You mentioned the point about, I think, CAR T therapy, as they say, actually, for which is very expensive. And I think so things like that, if they do, it's a huge thing for India and the population here. I just do hope that some of these measures do get incorporated in the budget. And on the budget day, when we contact you, hope there's something positive and happy to look forward to. So
sure. And I strongly believe that we are going in the right direction. And a lot of changes happened in the last 10 years. And I think that, this budget will also, add to that and increase the momentum towards a $5 trillion economy.
That's true. Just as a footnote, if I may ask, since you mentioned this point about technology also, and this budget, there is, other than healthcare, there's also a lot of focus on education. Do you think when we talk of research and investment in research, anything you would want to say in terms of on the talent and on growing that? Any thought there?
Yeah, so we need to invest in our higher education. We need to make sure that we have more world-class institutions. We need to build capacity and capability in these new technologies. You talked about CAR T technology. It requires us to develop capability in DNA sequencing, invest in the equipment that's required for DNA sequencing. I also believe that we need to domestically manufacture the reagents so that the cost of DNA sequencing comes down significantly. So many things, so we need to look at these things one by one and plan for these things. I also believe that if government increases the spending on the R&D and we give incentives for industry to do that, industry will also come forward and add to that capacity. So that's what I'm hoping.
No, that's very important actually. And I think on the reagents part, on sequencing, when we were doing, we thought not just the equipment, even the reagents, everything were being imported actually. So,
right.
So thank you so much. You've taken your time, but thank you so much for this. I think look forward to some of these measures in the budget and hope to connect with you again.
Thanks, Kumar.
Thank you so much.